Picture this. He steps out of his truck after 2 brutal weeks on a remote job site. Dust in his hair, boots still holding the smell of concrete and heat, and all he wants is silence, a shower, a cold drink, the kind of calm you only appreciate after you've been living out of a toolbox and a motel bed. But the second he turns into his driveway, his brain stalls, because his backyard isn't a backyard anymore. It's a wedding venue. White tents stretched like sails across his grass. Folding chairs in neat rows, a champagne fountain bubbling like it's mocking him, parked right beside his grill. A DJ booth humming, people laughing, people drinking, people everywhere. 200 strangers, easy. And then he sees it, his tomato vines, his pride, his therapy, his 3-time county fair champions, getting yanked and snagged like they're just props for somebody's Instagram moment. The bride's veil catches in them, and nobody even flinches. Nobody even asks whose yard this is. He takes 1 step forward, and a woman appears like a character stepping out of a villain's script. Pearls. Perfect blonde hair that doesn't move. Designer outfit that probably costs more than his first pickup. The kind of smile that looks polite until you realize it's actually a warning. She marches right up to him, points at the yard like she owns the deed, and says, dead serious, "Sir, you're trespassing. Please leave before you ruin the photos." He just blinks. He thinks, did she really just tell me to leave my own house? A catering guy walks past and hands him a slider like he's some random guest who wandered into the wrong party, like he's the one crashing it. The woman in pearls doesn't even hesitate. "You can't be here," she says again, louder this time, like volume turns nonsense into law. He could have called the cops right there. He could have lost his temper. But Hank Brewster didn't survive decades in construction by reacting first. He survived by staying calm while chaos burned itself out, so he smiles, because Hank is a retired construction foreman, and he still has a demolition permit in his county record that never got revoked, and his phone still has old numbers that answer on the first ring. He looks at the tent stakes punched into his lawn, the extension cords running like veins across his property, the strangers stepping over his garden bed like it's nothing, and he thinks, oh, this is gonna get educational. But before that day turns nuclear, you've got to understand how it started, because nobody wakes up and randomly finds a wedding in their backyard unless something rotten has been growing for a while. 3 months earlier, Hank arrived in Willowbrook Estates with one goal: start over. His wife Sarah had died from cancer, and grief does this thing where it makes a room feel too big, too quiet, too heavy. His daughter Lisa begged him to come closer. "You don't have to do this alone, Dad," she said. So he sold what he didn't need, kept what mattered, and moved into his grandmother's old craftsman home. It sat on 2.3 acres, huge for a subdivision. Everyone else had those tiny quarter-acre lots, neat little rectangles like postage stamps. But Grandma's land kept the old farmland boundaries from before the neighborhood expanded. Big lawn, mature oak trees, a fence line that felt like it had history, garden space so good it almost looked unreal. Honeysuckle climbing the fence like it was trying to hug the property. In the mornings, Hank would drink coffee from Grandma's old percolator and listen to the wind chimes hanging from the oak tree where he and Sarah got married 20 years ago. The house didn't just feel like a house, it felt like a second chance, and that's exactly why someone else saw it as a paycheck. Her name was Priscilla Blackthorne, 52 years old, HOA president, self-appointed queen of Willowbrook Estates. The kind of person who drives a white BMW like it's a badge of authority. Married to the developer's nephew. Lives in the biggest home on the cul-de-sac, where her kitchen window just happens to have a perfect view of Hank's entire backyard. And more importantly, she's a real estate agent who consults for event planning, whatever that means. The harassment started in week 2. Hank was replacing rotten deck boards when he heard it, sharp clicks of stilettos on concrete. That sound alone made his shoulders tense. It's funny how the body recognizes trouble before the brain finishes the sentence. Priscilla marched up his driveway like she was serving a federal warrant, clipboard in hand, measuring tape around her neck like a doctor's stethoscope. A smile stretched tight across her face. "Mr. Brewster," she said, "your property violates 17 current subdivision standards." 17. She handed him a violation notice like it was a gift. Mailbox wrong style, weekly fine, fence 2 inches too tall, weekly fine, garden shed wrong color, weekly fine, driveway exceeds width, weekly fine. She had itemized it all with the joy of someone doing what they love. Total weekly damage, 450, until he corrected everything to HOA standards. Hank stared at the paper, then at her. "Half of this was here before the HOA even existed," he said. Priscilla's smile didn't change. "Grandfather clauses require proper documentation," she replied. "Your grandmother failed to submit paperwork during the 2019 covenant updates." That sentence was a knife, not because it was true, but because it was convenient. "Pay the fines," she said softly, "or we place a lien on the property." That night, Hank's blood pressure didn't just rise. It started making plans. So the next weekend, he did what construction people do when something doesn't smell right. He measured. He walked the neighborhood with a tape measure and a camera, like a man doing a site inspection, and what he found made his stomach tighten. A guy down the street had the same fence height violation. No fines. A realtor buddy of Priscilla's had the same mailbox style. No citation. Several newer homeowners had decorations clearly banned by the HOA rules. Massive yard ornaments, lights, fences, all of it, yet nobody bothered them but Hank's 75-year-old features. The ones that existed before Priscilla's rulebook. Those were apparently urgent. The monthly HOA meeting confirmed it. It felt like a middle school cafeteria, except the mean girl had legal authority and a lawyer in the family. Priscilla sat up front, speaking like she owned the room. "We need consistency," she'd say, staring right at the older homeowners in the back. "Some people think legacy status exempts them from progress." Hank didn't miss the pattern. Original homeowners, 5 of them, were constantly targeted. Newer residents, dozens, got free passes. It wasn't about rules, it was a squeeze. Force the originals to sell. Let developers grab the bigger lots. Turn land into money, and Hank's lot, 2.3 acres, was the biggest prize in the entire subdivision. He should have connected that earlier. But he was grieving, and grief makes you slow, makes you trust quiet days that don't deserve trust. 2 weeks later, Priscilla escalated. Hank was drinking coffee on the back porch when her BMW pulled up, followed by 2 more cars like some HOA tactical unit. 3 women stepped out with clipboards, cameras, measuring tape. Priscilla waved like they were friends. "Good morning, Hank," she called. "Time for your comprehensive compliance assessment." Then it started. Click, click, click of the camera shutter, taking pictures of his fence, his shed, his deck, his bird feeder, even his American flag like it was contraband. "This shed exceeds allowable square footage by 12%, one inspector announced. "This driveway violates setback requirements," another added. They measured like they were trying to hit a quota, and when they were done, Priscilla handed him a manila envelope thick enough to stop a bullet. "Congratulations," she said sweetly. 23 violations. Total weekly fines, 1,147, plus a professional assessment fee of $200. 30 days to comply, she said, voice calm. "Otherwise we file a lien and begin foreclosure." Now here's the thing about Hank. He didn't get promoted in construction by being the loudest guy on a site. He got promoted because he paid attention, and something his old foreman used to say popped into his head. When someone's trying this hard to screw you, they're usually covering their own mess. So Hank fought back the way he knew best. He documented. He built a spreadsheet. Photos, measurements, addresses, violation codes, like a project manager building a case. He found 43 identical violations in the subdivision that the HOA ignored, and then he made a call that changed everything. He filed a complaint with the city planning department about selective enforcement. 3 days later, a city inspector rolled in. Mr. Rodriguez, 30 years in code enforcement, the kind of guy who's seen every scam and still hates all of them equally. Rodriguez spent 4 hours walking Willowbrook, measuring, writing, taking notes. When he finished, he snapped his notebook shut like a judge dropping a gavel. "This is textbook selective enforcement," he said. "In 30 years I've never seen it this blatant." A week later, Hank got official notice. HOA violations issued in the last 6 months were suspended pending investigation, fines voided, foreclosure threats null, and the cherry on top, Priscilla received her own violation notice for her setback violation. Because once the city starts measuring, they measure everyone. Hank thought he'd won, but women like Priscilla don't retreat. They reload. Her next move arrived in the form of a $3,000 suit and a briefcase full of threats. Marcus Blackthorne, her brother-in-law, showed up at Hank's door like he was delivering doom itself. Expensive cologne, cold eyes, crisp paper. "Mr. Brewster," Marcus said, "you're being served with a cease and desist." The letter accused Hank of harassment, defamation, stalking, interference with business operations. They demanded he stop photographing violations, stop contacting city officials, submit to mediation overseen by Blackthorne Legal Services. At $400 an hour, in plain English, pay us to stop us from attacking you. Hank called his daughter Lisa, who worked in real estate finance and had a radar for legal nonsense. He read the letter out loud. Lisa laughed so hard she had to catch her breath. "Dad," she said, "this is intimidation." But here's the weird part. Why is a tiny HOA burning serious money over mailboxes? That question didn't let Hank sleep. So he went to the county courthouse to follow the money. Because budgets don't lie, people do. And what he found in public records made his heart thump like a warning alarm. The HOA had paid $67,000 in legal fees over 18 months, all to Blackthorne Legal Services. No competitive bids, no board votes, just checks. Then Hank found something even bigger. While digging into the original HOA documents from the late 70s, he found a survey map that made his hands go cold. His property wasn't legally included in their jurisdiction, the original. Boundary lines had been botched decades ago, placing his 2.3-acre lot under county jurisdiction instead of the subdivision's HOA authority. For 40 years, they'd been collecting dues and issuing violations on land they didn't legally control. Not just harassment, fraud. Hank hired a retired surveyor, Mrs. Kowalski, 73 years old, sharp as glass, with a transit set and no patience for nonsense. 2 days later, she confirmed it. "Hank," she said, tapping the stakes, "your lot is county jurisdiction. They don't own you. They never did." Hank filed a jurisdictional challenge and demanded the HOA prove legal authority over his property. Marcus responded with panic, an emergency motion claiming Hank was abusing the system with frivolous technicalities. Translation, they had no paperwork because they never checked. And just when Hank thought the story couldn't get crazier, a nervous 17-year-old kid knocked on his door at 7 a.m. holding a clipboard. Mr. Brewster?" the kid said. "I'm with Enchanted Events Catering. We're here to start setup for the Peterson-Wilson wedding this Saturday. We can't find the electrical hookups for the sound system." Hank stood there in his bathrobe, coffee halfway to his lips, staring at the kid like he'd spoken another language. "What wedding?" The kid's face drained. He flipped through his papers and held up a contract, right there, at the top, printed clean as day. Hank Brewster's address. Willowbrook Manor Estate, it read. A venue name Hank had never heard of. For a venue Hank apparently owned, without knowing it. And in that moment, standing in his own doorway, Hank realized the truth. Priscilla wasn't just trying to bully him out of his home. She had been selling his backyard like a product. And Saturday, 200 guests were coming. Hank didn't yell. He didn't slam the door. He invited the kid inside, poured him coffee and let him call his supervisor while Hank stared at that contract like it was radioactive. $15,000. That's what the bride's family had paid for exclusive access to Hank's backyard. $15,000 for land Hank legally owned, that Priscilla had quietly been renting out like an Airbnb on steroids. When the kid hung up, his hands were shaking. My boss says we've got 3 more events booked here next month, he whispered. Corporate retreat, anniversary party, another wedding, total bookings, 43 grand. That's when Mrs. Kowalski walked in, took one look at the paperwork spread across Hank's kitchen table, and let out a laugh that sounded like someone watching karma warm up. Hank, she said, adjusting her glasses, this woman didn't just commit fraud, she created a paper trail, contracts, insurance filings, vendor agreements, liability waivers, all listing Hank's address, all signed by Priscilla, all proving. She had been running a commercial event business on private property she didn't own, using HOA inspections to photograph the yard, using those photos to market exclusive estate weddings, using her authority to scare Hank away while she monetized his grief. And here's the part that made Hank sit down. Priscilla had purchased business liability insurance listing Hank's home as an approved venue. She had literally insured stolen property. That night, Hank didn't sleep. He coordinated. His daughter Lisa called lawyers. Mrs. Kowalski contacted municipal offices. The catering company alerted the bride's family, who immediately started talking about criminal charges. And Hank made one quiet phone call to an old friend named Jake. Jake ran emergency municipal excavation crews, the kind of guy who doesn't ask emotional questions, just legal ones. Jake listened, paused, then laughed. Hank, you're telling me someone's hosting commercial events on residential land without permits, sewage capacity, or structural clearance? Yep. Jake whistled. That's a health hazard. That's unauthorized infrastructure. That's my favorite kind of problem. Saturday morning, 6 a.m. He promised to bring the biggest excavator that could fit through Hank's gate, because here's the thing most people don't know. If unauthorized commercial activity creates septic or structural risk, county crews can shut it down immediately. No court hearing, no HOA vote. Public safety trumps contracts. Friday night, Hank installed security cameras. He wanted everything recorded. And at 11 p.m., motion alerts started lighting up his phone. 3 figures crept across his lawn. One of them walked in heels. Even committing crimes, Priscilla couldn't let go of style. She tried sabotaging Jake's equipment. Sugar in fuel tanks. Loose cables. Amateur stuff. Hank watched silently as she upgraded her fraud charges to felony vandalism. Saturday morning, 5:30 a.m. A sheriff's deputy knocked on Hank's door with an emergency restraining order. Apparently, Priscilla had convinced a friendly judge that Hank was interfering with her legitimate business operations. The deputy read it out loud. Hank handed him the catering contract with Hank's address printed on top. The deputy blinked, radioed his supervisor, then radioed again, because now he had a court order protecting trespass. Jake arrived with his crew right after, took one look at the sabotage, shook his head. Hank, whoever did this has never worked real machinery. They tried to disable a cat excavator with kitchen tools. By 7 a.m., inspectors rolled in. Building department. Health Department, Environmental Safety. Every single agency that cares deeply about unlicensed commercial gatherings on residential land. And guess what? They found real problems. Residential foundations not rated for event loads, improper sewage capacity, soil contamination from repeated food service. No permits, no zoning approval, no commercial licensing. Everything Priscilla built was illegal. Then Channel 7 arrived. Live cameras, microphones, consumer fraud team. That's when Marcus Blackthorne showed up screaming into his phone about retaliatory inspections. He lasted exactly 30 seconds before reporters started asking questions. He left immediately. Political allies tried stepping in next. County commissioners, state reps, all walking across Hank's lawn, acting like they owned it. One of them announced inspections were temporarily suspended. That's when the reporter asked on camera, "Are you ordering investigators to stop because the suspect donated to your campaign?" Silence. Mrs. Kowalski walked out holding a banker's box. Campaign contribution records. Legal contracts. Payment trails. She named names. She listed amounts. She connected dots on live television. And right on cue, Jake radioed from the backyard. Septic contamination confirmed. Health Department declared the property temporarily closed. Building inspector declared unauthorized structures unsafe. Public gathering prohibited. The politicians left faster than spilled coffee. At 9 a.m. sharp, the first wedding guests arrived. Luxury cars pulled into Hank's driveway expecting flowers and champagne. Instead, they found police vehicles, news vans, inspectors, and a massive excavator warming up. The bride stepped out in her dress just as Jake's machine lifted its claw over Priscilla's illegal concrete platform. And then, crack, the platform split like dry ice. Dust rose. Guests froze. Phones came out. Priscilla arrived screaming as thousands of dollars of her stolen infrastructure turned into rubble. "You can't destroy my venue!" she yelled. The reporter stepped forward. "Ma'am, why did you build commercial structures on property you don't own?" Priscilla tried saying she had contracts. Jake held up county demolition orders. Mrs. Kowalski showed survey markers proving every structure sat inside Hank's property line. Then the excavator crushed the decorative wedding arch, the outdoor kitchen, the permanent tent anchors, all gone. The bride started crying. Her father told cameras they'd paid $15,000. Detectives arrived with arrest warrants. Priscilla was handcuffed while 47 neighbors watched. Fraud, theft by deception, operating unlicensed businesses, insurance fraud, tax evasion. Conspiracy. Marcus lost his law license weeks later. Priscilla posted $50,000 bail and still couldn't outrun 14 felony charges. 17 families got restitution. The HOA dissolved. The neighborhood rebuilt itself without bullies. They renamed the group Willowbrook Neighbors Association. Mrs. Kowalski became president. Hank's backyard hosted real weddings afterward, with permission. The original bride even came back months later for a quiet ceremony. She hugged Hank and thanked him for saving her family from financial ruin. Jake's company doubled in size. State laws changed. HOAs now must disclose commercial activity. And Hank still drinks coffee on that porch. Still listens to wind chimes under the oak tree, still grows award-winning tomatoes. Only now, when people look at his yard, they don't see dollar signs, they see boundaries. And Priscilla? She's learning what happens when you confuse power with ownership. Because sometimes justice doesn't arrive quietly. Sometimes it shows up with flashing lights, news cameras, and a demolition crew. And Hank Brewster? He didn't smash cake. He didn't call the cops. He went bulldozer, legally, spectacularly, and without mercy.